Thank you for listening to another episode of New England Horror Files podcast. Tonight, we're going to be jumping into the Salem Witch Trials again. And this time, we're just going to be touching on a little bit of history that rings a little personal and to our family. Mary ended up digging up a article, as she tends to do, about some people that we found we have a relation to. And tell us a little more
Right.
about that, Mary.
Yeah, so Salem Witch Trials. I'm sure we'll be talking about the Salem Witch Trials more than one time
Yeah, there's
because
a lot to go
really
over. This is just yet another piece
it's
of the puzzle.
there's such like an American historical like travesty. Do you know what I mean? Like
Oh yeah,
it's
for sure.
like how do you like even reconcile that at all? Like I don't know. I first read The Crucible and I saw the movie. I don't know, I was a teenager. I don't remember. And at that time, I was like, "Are you freaking kidding me?" I'll never forget freaking who's that actress? Joan. She plays the mother on Pleasantville. Joan Allen. She's pregnant and she's accused of witchcraft, like in prison. Like what? You know. So yeah. So I love research. I love genealogy. I've been doing my genealogy for years now. I finally had some time to really, nail some stuff down. And I found out a few weeks ago that we are indeed related to Rebecca Nurse, who is, that name from the Salem Witch Trials. She was, one of the first women accused, and she was much older, and we know that name. But more recently, I discovered that not only was Rebecca Nurse accused and brought to trial, quote unquote. I'm going to use that word trial very loosely here, but she was hung. Also, one of her sisters was hung as a quote unquote witch. And one of her other sisters was also she was accused but never brought to trial and ultimately was released when they released everybody. So learning this when because you don't see their last name, they all have different last names. So like if you don't know this, you're not thinking like, are they related? Like I just never was. And there's so much, there's so many players in the Salem Witch Trials, event that I didn't know this. So I ended up diving into the whole story of the Towne sisters. That's Towne, Towne. And I think it hit a little more close to home too, because they are ancestors of ours. These are our, great, 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 however darn many great aunts, um, and it was a really poignant experience. I'll say that much. So I just kind of want to talk about it a little more and just kind of, share what we've learned and, a little bit more about their story and how this, relates to us today, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So I think where to begin? I mean, I guess we could go over a little bit of their background. I mean, basically, um they're Rebecca Nurse, Mary Esty, and Sarah Cloyce. Obviously, they were originally the Towne sisters. Their parents are William and Joanna Towne. They came over from West Yarmouth, England. They moved into um, Salem Village ultimately, and they were actually very respected members of the community, of the church. They were, described as being devout and all those things. The parents also, like, they were one of those families that were just, they were artisans, they were skilled workers, they were property owners. um William and Joanna Towne. Sidebar, her maiden name is Blessings, which I just found to be very interesting. Their mother's maiden name is she's Joanna Blessings. um they had, I think she had 9 children, and then their children went on to have a boatload of children. So like they're said to have, be the ancestors of like thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of descendants. So like that's crazy to think about. We're not the only ones. There's so many. the children of Rebecca Nurse, even just her. And her homestead still stands. Her house still stands in what was Salem Village. It's now Danvers, Massachusetts, which is interesting that we've been there. um, so yeah, where the hell was I going with this? Yeah, so some of the history that I found out, which let me actually start with how I really got a lot of information about their story. PBS has a 3-part documentary that is it's called Three Sovereigns for Sarah, and it is all about the story of the Towne sisters. It's focused on them. Um, it contains a lot of like court record, like the actual court record dialogue, and it's very much based on the facts of the time. And I really recommend you see it. It's very, very good. It was made in 1985, for God's sakes. Like, and it's funny watching this because it's so old. It's so well done, and you know that even in the time, there was a concern, obviously, about their story. Do you see what I'm saying? And as I was saying earlier, it's the story of the oldest sister. Well, she's actually the youngest, but she's the one who survives. Sarah Cloyce, or Sarah Town Cloyce. She survives, and from the time she is freed until the time she dies, she's hell bent on getting her sister and her name, all of their names cleared, and seeking some sort of retribution, and at least like dealing with Samuel Paris. This isn't in the movie, but there was a whole movement to get Samuel Paris out of Salem Village, and he was eventually, I think after about 5 years, I think, was kicked out of town. um and there was she went on to Boston, and she did all the things to really fight for her family, and it was incredible to watch because, I mean, I can't imagine you're living in a time where people can nowadays, we don't think about these things, right? People say all sorts of things about other people, like we don't, I don't know, it's not, you could say whatever you want. But at this time, I mean, this is, as we've talked about this before, this is pre-Bill of Rights, it's pre-Constitution. We're in, you know, puritanical pre-colonial New England. And when someone yells out witch, it's like it's not, it doesn't, it might stick. You know what I mean? It's like, and that's pretty freaking terrifying, particularly in the case
Yeah,
of
absolutely. That's crazy because it's
right?
like it's essentially the wild, wild west. There's no rule of law, or I mean, it's I say no rule of law, but very limited rule of law.
Yeah,
This is
it's very
This
different.
is pre like the rights that we know as in America. Bill of Rights,
Right.
like you said, Constitution.
Yeah, it's very, very different. It especially, yeah, pre-Constitution. And I'm not saying nobody had rights. I mean, as we learned, I learned this. I had no idea. And of course, if I had done some research, like real in-depth research, I would have learned. But back then they had when Rebecca Nurse went into prison, I think 30 some odd people wrote a petition in support for her. People were,
Mhm.
they were concerned, but she was that much of a, community member. She was that well known. She was known for being pious. Like, she's a, very firm member of the church. I mean, this woman was, invalid. I mean, seriously, she had hearing problems. She was like on her sick deathbed, and they like took her out of her house to bring her to frickin' to jail. So she's like, this elderly woman, like, it's really, really bad. Like, this is not cool. So anyway, but a bunch of her neighbors and family and whoever, they wrote a petition, and they wrote a petition, signed it in her favor, like, nope, she's not a witch. Like, so there were people writing petitions. Mary Esty wrote a petition for herself in prison. um she actually wrote two that I know of. Sarah Cloyce was writing petitions all the time. So like there was some sense of like, law in a sense. I'm not saying there wasn't, but like, there was one of the sisters, I believe it was Sarah. petitioned the governor or whoever to not allow spectral evidence in the trials. So, like, while this is all happening, people they're standing up and they're speaking out. Um, but there was one story I heard. This is actually earlier today. I was listening to another podcast about this, and there was I believe it was a reverend, and I don't quote me on this because I can't think of his name, but I'm going to say it anyway. Somebody who had been like, no, like, I'm going to stand up for the accused because you're wrong. And they started kind of leaning towards him and pointing fingers at him. Like, it's believed that Mary Esty, so Rebecca Nurse, the sister Rebecca, she's the oldest one. She's in her 70s. Um, she ends up, let me see exactly how old she was. I want to get that right. I know she was in her 70s, but all right. Rebecca Nurse was born 1621. So in 1692, she's 71. So, I mean, that's old even for the time. So,
Yeah.
yeah, right. Like, so she gets jailed. Then their sister Mary Esty gets jailed. And then Sarah, the sister Sarah, goes to church, and Paris, Reverend Samuel Paris, decides to have a sermon about um among us there is one snake sort of thing, and he seemed to be directing it towards her, given the fact that her sisters were already implicated. She ends up, like, she kind of had a very, I don't want to say cavalier, but a very, like, outspoken attitude against what was going on. And she ended up getting thrown in jail for it. She kind of stormed out of church, like, are you fucking kidding me? She storms out of church. The door gets, slams behind her, and she ends up getting arrested. They start pointing fingers at her. Now, she stuck up for herself very firmly, using the Bible, and they had nothing against her, but they still threw her in jail, and she ultimately survived. But, you know, when you, like, it just goes to show that, like, some of these people, when they started sticking up for themselves or others, they ran the risk of, those people ratting them out too. Not ratting them out. That's not the right word, because I don't actually believe, maybe a little bit, but I really don't believe there was any actual witchcraft going on here, particularly with, people like these sisters. There's really no evidence. And
No, there's obviously some sort of other motivation.
right. So, well, that's the other thing is
It's a
when you
conspiracy. Think about it.
yeah, man. So,
But in all
what I
honesty,
see, no,
something's
no,
going on. It wasn't.
no shit. Well, here's another thing I found. Um, let's see. Of course, you have all your, the crying, screaming girls and their bullshit. You've got Ann Putnam Sr., who, a thing they mentioned in the movie Three Sovereigns for Sarah is that she had suffered a good amount of what's it called, loss, like child loss, whereas the Towne families had tons of kids. Like, there might have been some sort of, I mean, I don't want to use the word jealousy, but maybe that, maybe drove her to a point. This is mentioned in the movie, so I wonder if there's some sort of historical basis to it, or maybe some kind of family lore. I'm not sure. But if you go back to 1670, when uh, the father of the Towne children, William, has just died, or he's about to die. He's very old. I believe the mother, Joanna Blessings, was a widow at this point. But there was like I said, the Reverend in the town. Bear with me. I got this long article in front of me. I'm trying to keep my notes together. Where are we? Actually, let me read something about the father. According to the book Genealogical and Personal Memoirs, the Townes were a reputable family. Goodman William Towne was a man of character, substance, and social position, but about a quarter of the century after his death, three of his daughters were brought under the condemnation of a fanatical court on the charge of witchcraft. Two of them suffered death on the gallows, while the third barely escaped a like fate at the hands of the unthinkable and ill-advised judicial body. The name of Rebecca Nurse, who suffered the death of a martyr, will endure with time through the centuries yet to come. and they who are her descendants, the descendants of her martyr sisters, will look back with pleasure to the fact that she and they are their ancestors, for they were good, innocent, and undefending women, the victims of fanaticism, as unjust as in its accusations as it was cruel and barbarous in meting out its punishment. This unfortunate episode in the history of the Towne family brought no disgrace upon name and their lives. What? And their lives, not one descendant of either Rebecca Towne, nurse, or her sister Mary Towne Esty, who could not feel a just pride in the noble characters of these martyr mothers. Eh. Yeah, I think like that's the thing is like when you watch this is not where I'm going with this, but reading that made me think of that. When you watch Three Sovereigns for Sarah, and like as for me, like I cried a lot because it was a very emotional movie. And to think like, wow, this is family, right? You know, like fuck. It was very, profound. All right, so Mary Towne Esty, she married Isaac Esty. She had 7 children. They had one of the largest farms in Salem Village. In 1670, Mary Esty's mother, who was by then a widow, was suddenly accused of witchcraft. She was never tried for the crime, but how do I? Okay, I'm reading this from historyofmassachusetts.org. I'm just going to read this also. Several years earlier, their mother had been accused of witchcraft but was never tried. However, local gossip during the infamous 1692 trial suggested that the witch profession was handed down from mother to daughter. Various sources on the subject indicate Joanna was never formally accused of the crime, and it was instead was merely the subject of rumors of witchcraft after she came to the defense of a Topsfield minister, Reverend Thomas Gilbert, who had been brought to court on the charge of intemperance. The charge was the result of rumors and accusations made by the local Gould family. The Goulds reportedly became angered when Joanna testified on behalf of Gilbert in court and later spread rumors that she was a witch. According to the book Currents of Malice, Mary Towne Esty and her family in Salem Witchcraft. In 1670, Joanna Towne, then a widow, 75 years old, became involved in a ministerial battle in Topsfield. So Topsfield is where the parents eventually kind of moved to. And that's where like the girls were born. But Topsfield's like right next to Danvers. It's like, it's the same area, but just this different town. Such battles were endemic in early New England towns and were to escalate to a terrible climax in neighboring Salem Village 22 years later. The first settled minister in Topsfield, the Reverend William Perkins, had been a minister at Gloucester. It is hard to reconcile the complaint of one of his lady parishioners that he was better fitted to be a lady's chambermaid than on the pulpit, and those of his supporters who declared he spoke the truth in a manner that would make their ministers hide their faces in shame, and that he could pronounce the word damn with a greater emphasis than any other man of his time. His detractors, on the other hand, did not hesitate to hail him into court on the charge of drunkenness. His replacement in 1663 was Reverend Thomas Gilbert, a Scotsman. It was not long before he too was in trouble for much of the same reason. He was presented in court on suspicions of being overtaken with drink. As all 3 Towne sisters were in prison for being witches like their mother before them, quote unquote, and their mother was Old Goodwife Towne, a little background information about the relationships between the Goulds and the Townes is necessary. These families were on opposite sides of the quarrel involving Richard Gilbert. At the time of the court trials in which Goodwife Towne appeared in 1670, she had been a widow for 2 years. As Joanna was living with her daughter-in-law Phoebe Perkins Towne, a Gould descendant, it was a situation ripe for mother-daughter-in-law discord. Joanna, as will be shown, was in effect saying that Phoebe's mother, the wife of Deacon Perkins, was uncharitable, if not downright dishonest. Joanna Towne set herself up against the whole Gould clan in her spirited defense of Reverend Gilbert. This may well have been the origin of her reputation as a witch, quote unquote, in Topsfield. So there's that. Also,
well, shit.
Right? Shaka. Was there freaking drama like in the soil of damn, the area? That's so like when I read that, I'm kind of like, okay, really? What do you think about that?
I don't know. I
I don't know.
don't know.
It should be noted that the Gould family were actually close friends of the Putnam family, who later became some of the most active accusers in the Salem Witch Trials. So, what do you think about that?
Damn, dude. It's like they're obviously targeting them for some reason.
Right?
So I
Is
don't.
it like
I
that's a
mean,
little
we
nuts.
got a little bit of the pieces there, but something's going on. I don't know.
But wait, there's more.
Oh, there's more.
Of course, there's more. To make matters worse, between Mary Esty and the Putnams, Mary's husband Isaac and several of her Towne family members also drew the ire of the Putnam family in 1686 when they testified against Captain John Putnam for harvesting trees within the Topsfield boundary, according to the historical collections of the Topsfield Historical Society periodical. So this is 16 years later after, the Reverend drinking debacle. Now we're still having issues, between the Putnams and the Towns and the Goulds and the Putnams, the Goulds, the Putnams, and the Towns. Okay. And I quote, the Putnams were strong willed men of high temper and seemingly eager for controversy and even personal conflict. In a suit brought in 1686, Isaac Esty Sr., Isaac Esty Jr., John Towne, and Joseph Towne Jr. testified that they were in the woods within Topsfield bounds on the south side of the river and saw Captain John Putnam of Salem Farms or Village and his sons and some of his cousins cutting down timber within Topsfield bounds and on Topsfield men person per, ta, 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 and on Topsfield's men's properties and several. How many times can you say Topsfield? Topsfield is actually a difficult word to say. Several of Topsfield
Topsfield.
men,
Topsfield.
Topsfield, especially when you start adding in other words with it. Gosh, all right, Topsfield.
All right. So the Putnams were cutting down the Topsfield's trees.
Fine. Basically, they were cutting them down. They're like, what the heck? Oh, wait, we got the word violence I'm seeing in the future. Okay, hold on, hold on. Several of the Topsfield men forewarned Captain John Putnam from cutting timber on their land. The said Captain Putnam replied, I have failed the timber yet is here cut down on my orders, and I will keep cutting and carrying away from this land till next March. Putnam being asked, what by violence? His answer, I by violence. Oh, wait, there's no punctuation here. What, by violence? His answer, I by violence. And further said, you may sue me, you know where I dwell, and then did his company fall on. The court again decided in favor of the Topsfield men, which of course only served to make the Putnams more bitter. So, you see the stage we have going on here?
Yeah.
That's crazy. Captain Putnam, he's like, nope, you're not going to tell me what to do. Jeez.
I'm taking your
While
fucking
standing
trees.
on,
Fuck you.
while standing on someone else's property,
Seriously, like the balls, like
right? That is some balls. Like he's got witnesses. They're like, this feels like some Topsfield. Is it Topsfield and McCoy's? Have you ever seen that movie?
Hatfields and McCoys.
Yeah, Hatfields and McCoy's. Yeah, one of
Yeah.
them's Kevin Costner, I think.
Yeah. I saw a little bit of it.
Yeah, they end up it's this huge family feud that goes on forever. It's
Yeah,
legit
shared
too. It's an
territorial
actual.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't remember all the details, but this, you got Putnam and his men, and the Topsfield and his men, and then their sons, and their, my God, what a freaking mess. So this is kind of the background that we're going into this with, and that really gives you so much more depth, right? In my opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I mean, like it happened for a reason. It's not just like yeah, anyone you talk to, they're going to be like, They're not going to be like, oh, these people were performing crazy ritual acts and feats of magic, and they were murdered as a result of it. If they were doing these like actual witchcraft and shit, wouldn't they just kill their fucking accusers or so? You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
so what I'm getting at is like, there's some sort of obvious conspiracy there,
Right.
whatever it is. Like, there's some sort of like this tells a story. Like even that little bit of information about the trees and like, okay,
Right.
these families are, you know, or it seems like one of those families in particular is very violent and, you know, steps over the line, and you know they're causing this problem. They take him to court, like over, you know, a clear um offense. You know what I mean? Like that's pretty
Right.
egregious. Do you know what I mean? Like it's like
Yeah.
you could go to court and
Exactly.
be like, oh, you know what, the neighbor backed out and hit my signpost and hit my mailbox. I want $500 to fix it. You know what I mean? You could have something like that. It's like, oh yeah, I backed out and fucking hit him. Like, whoa, you know, my bad.
Yeah.
But it's
Right.
just like, oh no, I'm going onto your property and cutting your shit down, and I'm going to tell you to shut the fuck up because I'm going to keep fucking doing
Right.
it until you have to sue me. I'm going to tell you to sue me, then you sue me, and that, you know, like it's
And then I'm gonna accuse your whole family of witchcraft. Right.
well,
Okay.
I mean,
Fuck.
to put that in the context of this whole situation is kind of crazy. Just that little couple paragraphs you read, you know?
Yeah.
Because I'm like, it says a
Exactly.
lot
Yeah.
about that family and like how they operate. And
Yeah,
I
and
mean,
also like the
everything taken with
environment.
a grain of salt, you know, like everything's alleged, I guess. Like, but these are historical accounts, I suppose. So, you know,
Right. Oh yeah, there's a lot of
people lie, people misquote things, people blah, whatever. I understand,
yeah.
but um,
Well, it's an interesting perspective. It's more information than just which, like it's a deeper understanding. And then additionally, and this I don't have this in front of me like I did with this we just read, but in Three Sovereigns for Sarah, that they actually the opening scene is where they're talking about, well, it's actually the second scene, but the opening scene is Sarah Cloyce as like a elderly frail old woman riding in a wagon in winter to go visit these, like, I don't know if they're judges, but I don't know what they were called, magistrates or whatever back in the day. She's going to tell the story, and she's like, you know Reverend Paris, they're trying to hire Reverend Paris because Salem Village didn't have a pastor or a reverend. I forget what they're called back then, but
right,
they didn't have a reverend. A lot of people were actually going to church in Beverly, which is like a town or two over, whatever, but they wanted to hire Reverend Paris, but Putnam was all in favor of it. I believe it was John Putnam that they were just talking about. Um, don't quote me on that, but I think it was John, but there's so many Putnams. There was a camp that was for Reverend Paris, and there was a camp that was not for Reverend Paris. So the towns were in the camp that were against him. They didn't want him coming into town for one reason or another, and that was yet another dividing feud between the people. You see what I'm
right,
saying?
yep,
Yeah, so like it almost seems like there's been this, insane tension forever, right? Like just forever. And so,
yeah.
that's the environment, or like
That's the stage.
the stage, exactly. Yeah, that's what
That's
I
the
was looking for.
backdrop.
Yeah, like it's just here we are. you know. So it makes sense that, there would be, one side against another. And in Three Sovereigns for Sarah at the end, she says, she had another thing, I don't remember what it was, but she had a map or like a piece of paper where she drew on it, all the properties in the area. And she said she drew a line down the middle. And she says all of the accusers are on this side of the line, and all of the accused are on this side. It's
Hmm.
like it was very much divided. And it freaking worked. 20 people were freaking executed, and however many more were in jail. Like, I think hundreds were accused. It wasn't only in Salem Village, though. It was in the very general area, but 20 people were still. A man was crushed to death because he wouldn't admit to being a witch, right? Like, For the love of God. A 4-year-old was in jail. I still can't get over that. A 4-year-old being accused of witchcraft. And
Yeah.
here's the thing. The thing that pisses me off the most, and like I've said, shameless plug for our episode on spectral evidence, which I thought was pretty good. We also talk about this with my brain, New England Historical Society, on our episode with her. We talk a little bit about Salem witch trials and spectral evidence and all that, and spectral evidence was all they had. It's
Yeah.
not like they had spectral evidence, and then they had like some people coming forward like, Mary Esty came to my house, or I went to her house. We had a quarrel, and when I left, I felt an unknown, smack on my shoulder. What? Like, okay. Then we have these hysterical girls who are like,
But that's also kind of spectral evidence.
yeah, I mean, yeah, that's true. That's true.
You know what I mean? If you were to be like, oh,
Yeah,
she hit me with a shovel when I went to leave, that's one thing. But like, oh, I felt a, if it was this sort of thing, like, oh, I felt a spirit in her house and I had to leave or something along those like that's still fucking bullshit.
right. Yeah,
You know what
oh
I mean?
shit. Exactly. Yeah, like that's the
It's
thing.
just like a targeted. I don't know what to call it. It's like some serious like this group is after, I'm imagining like land and property more than likely of like other people that they had, they
And
had some sort of
yeah,
quarrel with.
that could have been part of it for sure. I mean, I do know that Rebecca Nurse did not own her homestead. She had a 300-acre farm, which is insane, by the way. That's like the size of the Yellowstone. Did you ever watch Yellowstone?
No.
Oh my gosh. Anyway, he's got 250 acres in, maybe he has more than that. You know what? I'm going to stop talking because I think he had actually 250,000 acres. My bad. But anyway, 300 acres is
Whoa,
still a
whoa,
lot of freaking
whoa! Hold
property.
up, hold up. Which one is it?
That's what I'm saying. Hold on, I'll look it up because I'm actually, now that I'm saying those words, I'm like, am I correct? How many acres did John Dutton have in Yellowstone? What? Oh, I'm completely wrong. I've only
Right.
watched Yellowstone like 4 times. 700 to 800,000 acres. His ranch was, the Yellowstone Ranch is about the size of Rhode Island. Okay, so I'm wrong. Let's back up and forget I ever said that Rebecca's nurse's homestead was the size of Rhode Island. Um,
Okay.
we'll
So
just put that somewhere
300
else.
acres, much
Okay,
smaller.
300 acres, but still, a lot of property.
Yeah,
Um,
that's still a
but
considerable amount of property.
but she didn't own it. They were on like a rent to own or lease to own or something to that effect, but they were almost paid up. So she didn't quite own it, but she almost did, kind of thing.
I gotcha. Yeah,
But
yeah.
still,
And
the
what's there now? I feel like we talked about this
on
once.
hers.
But yeah, where she
Well,
lived.
if you look up the Rebecca Nurse homestead, like it's totally a thing. You can go visit it. Let
Where is
me
it? Where's it located?
let me it's in Danvers. It's a red pre-colonial house kind of. Here we are. 17th century house museum. It's on 149 Pine Street in Danvers, and it's like the property. I don't know if it's the whole property. I don't have a ton of info about. Let's see. About us. Visitor info. Ooh, a guide to respectful cemetery and monument visitation. That's helpful. Oh my god, I bet they've had problems. They don't say tons about it. It's a nonprofit now. A guide to respectful cemetery. Oh my gosh. I bet people go there all the damn time, like, because if you think about it, Salem now, have you ever been to Salem like around Halloween time?
Yeah, I think we went up there right around Halloween. Yeah.
So, you know, like the week around Halloween time, it's absolutely batshit.
Yeah.
Like, absolutely crazy. I bet people, like, go up there and have been like, I have been to Mercy Brown's grave, and Mercy Brown, as we know,
Ooh.
is the yeah, I've been there a few times. It's very easy to access. It's not, you know, but I've been there a bunch of times, and there's always stuff on the grave, like people leave things. I
Ooh,
found
yeah.
poetry there, you know what I mean, like rocks and other whatever. Just people leave things. Like, I've also been to Nine Men's Misery. Like, these are just like places that I can think of that I've gone to. Nine Men's Misery in Cumberland. Is it Cumberland?
Yep. Over
It's
by the
either
public
Cumberland.
library.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if it was Cumberland or Lincoln, but we went out there and there was gifts and offerings out there. So people like go to these places and they leave things, and so I wonder if like that's happened here. You know that they have to. Yeah, while we realize many visitors like to leave mementos to show their care and well wishes, some of these seemingly harmless tokens can sometimes cause real damage. Also, please be aware that in Massachusetts, grave robbings are illegal and prohibited by state law and municipal ordinances. I didn't know that. The pressure and material from grave rubbings can damage the stone's surface, causing etching, flaking, and accelerating deterioration, especially on historic gravestones. Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 272, Section 73, makes it a crime to damage or injure a grave or monument. Huh. Yeah, it makes sense. I just didn't know that. Oh my god. Oh wow. If you read this whole thing about their guide to I'm not gonna read the whole thing, but they show pictures of things that have been left. Um they have a pile of change and it's captioned with the amount of money that we had to pry off of our 1885 granite obelisk dedicated to Rebecca Nurse. Does that mean it was glued on? Shoved into gaps. Yeah, so I suggest you read this, people, because you really should be respectful when you go to places like this. Yeah, that's crazy because it's like a historical site. You know, the house is the original house. It's a 17th century house museum. Um, Jeez. Yeah, respectful cemetery and monument visitation is a must. So anyhow, yeah, yeah, and like I've said, Mary Esty also had a lot of property. I'm not sure what Sarah Clay's situation was, but I do know that they were all, you know, they were a successful family. They had an abundance of kids. I don't remember the Rebecca Nurse had like 80 grandkids or something. Like it was a ridiculous amount of grandchildren. Like
Wow.
their family was, yeah, right. Their family was humongous. You know, they were well known. They were prosperous. They were, you know, um, and maybe someone was, you know, sick of sick of them or didn't like them or you know they do
Yeah. I
mention
mean,
in
realistically, we'll never know entirely, but we can
no
speculate based on just these little pieces of evidence.
right. So here's another a quick fact about Mary Esty. Um on May 18th, she was released on her own reconnaissance, but as soon as she got released, Mercy Lewis, who was one of her accusers, like started losing her shit and said, "Oh my god, she's tormenting me." And so they arrested her again within 48 hours. She was then okay, so they made another complaint against her, John Putnam Jr., Benjamin Hutchinson, on behalf of Mercy Lewis, Abigail Williams, and Mary Walcott in May of 1692. They arrested her again. They took her for a pretrial examination. They put her to jail. So I guess they went after her pretty hard with the testimony of like the girls and their crap. I'm just gonna say for the record that like I don't understand. I do not believe these people at all. Looking back
Hmm.
from, obviously it's 2026, actually. I almost said 2025. It's 2026 now.
Well, it's
I have a
January
very
3rd, so I mean, yeah.
it's new. So, I have a very different point of view, right? I'm not living in this time. I'm not there. I have always looked back on this like, dude, shut the fuck up. You're clearly lying. This is clearly crap. Like, enough. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
I mean, yeah, I agree. I agree. They're
I
obviously
mean,
full of shit.
exactly. Yeah, like exactly. I feel like they're full of shit and it's obvious. Now, again, I don't want to say like don't believe your kids when they tell you something. Like that's a whole other topic, but like this, I'm not buying it. And I just the whole like screaming in the courtroom crap and like, "Oh my god, she's raising her hands and now she's raising my hands." Like, shut the fuck up. Like, I can't I have so much trouble talking about this just because it's like it's so is
Horrifying.
yeah, it really is. It's like, how did they get this far? Because again, it's not like they have solid evidence. Now, I guess at the time too, what kind of solid evidence could you have? You know what I mean? Like, uh, there's no video, there's no photos, there's none of that. So all you really have is, I guess, eyewitnesses. I don't know. There's other things too, I'm sure, like documents and things. Anyway, I don't know. So anyway, ultimately with these two sisters, like, um, Mary Esty filed petitions. She filed a first petition requesting that she could get witnesses called on her behalf and that spectral evidence not be allowed in the trials. She was then convicted, and she wrote another petition. This is Mary Esty from jail, and she's pleading not on behalf of herself, but on the behalf of the other accused witches who were being, innocently targeted here and innocently accused. Um, she kind of is at the point where she's accepted her fate, and there's nothing she can do. She's about to be put to death. She's done everything she can, but she's speaking out for, the others in her same position. It's a very, humbling thought and like a humble petition. That was a really sad thing to read, like to watch rather in that show when she, reads the petition. So they Rebecca and Mary eventually get executed. Um I'm not sure about Mary Easty, but Rebecca Nurse, I guess they just discarded her body, and her son and her husband went in the middle of the night and got her, and they gave her a proper burial because they figured they she was found guilty of being a witch, and so she doesn't get a proper Christian burial. Rebecca Nurse was also excommunicated from the church, and like that was a big thing for her. This is from historyofmassachusetts.org. The guilt of putting Esty to death seems to have weighed on some of the other colonists because on November 14th, 1692, 17-year-old Mary Herrick met with Reverend Joseph Garish and Reverend John Hale. Sidebar: Reverend John Hale wrote a book called A Modest Inquiry. Let me find it. And I was reading this earlier, but like I didn't finish it, so I can't totally talk about it because I just didn't. Modest inquiry into nature of witchcraft, and he goes over. He had an eyewitness account, and he goes over and kind of, I don't want to say condemns, but kind of condemns the trials. But anyway, Reverend Joseph Garish and Reverend John Hale at Garish's house in Wenham, and told them that Hale's wife and the ghost of Mary Esty both appeared to her on multiple evenings in November. Herrick said that Hale's wife afflicted her and also claimed that Esty told her that she had been wrongfully executed and said if Herrick told Hale and Garish that she was innocent, then Miss Hale would stop afflicting her. What the? Herrick was neither one of the original accusers in the Salem witch trials, nor did she give testimony in any of the cases. It seems her involvement in the trials was impromptu, and there isn't enough information to determine her motive. It's not clear why she's accusing Hale's wife or why she's specifically trying to clear Esty's name. Hale's wife was never arrested or tried, but the unfounded accusation is said to have caused Hale to turn against the Salem witch trials, even spurring him to write his book, A Modest Inquiry into the Nature of Witchcraft, which heavily criticized the trials. They eventually came to an end in 1693, and many historians suggest that it was Esty's petition, which asked the court to be reasonable, think twice about what they were doing, that it helped end them. So that's kind of like the nuts and bolts of that. By 1711, the colony had passed a bill clearing all the names, or clearing the names of some. Restitution was paid to Mary Esty's family and Rebecca Nurse's family for £20 for the wrongful executions. And this Sarah Cloyce was in jail for a year. She was in very bad conditions for a year. I'm talking like a shed in the New England winter. And that
Wow.
was she was close to death when she was taken out of there. And I guess eventually went to like a private jail. So like somebody with property got paid to house her, like literally in a shed. It was pretty bad. And from that moment on until I think she had another 10-ish years after that, she made it another 10 years fighting for, justice for her family, and eventually died before they were cleared. But in Three Sovereigns for Sarah, it shows her going to um these magistrates and Longshanks, and he ends up giving her. He's like, this process is going to take forever, and it's probably going to be another 5 years. She's like, I don't have 5 years. Like, like, look at me, man. Like, I don't have 5 years. And he gives her at the end. He gives her three sovereigns. They're coins from the time, gold coins, one for each of her and her and her sisters. And he basically says like, you know, I can't clear their names, but for their sake and for the sake of your story, and I believe you, but we can't do that yet, like, but I will give you these. And so he gives them, and she takes them, and she finds some kind of solace in that. But 3 weeks later, she died. And that was the end of her story with that. And it's just it for me, it gave me just so much more insight into the whole situation. And that movie is really well done. It's set back in 1692, and the clothing, and it's a little off, but it's fine. It does the job, and it shows these people, and in the beginning it shows the relationships of these sisters, and they're very close and they're very godly, and it's just it gives a whole new level of a way to think about it, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No kidding. Yeah, it's very, I don't know, it's very sobering. It's everything we're
It
talking about,
yeah, it
especially
is.
especially when she's petitioning for the lives of others and she's about to be executed. Like that's just crazy.
Right, and, like, that just goes to show, like, that is a very, like, I wanna say that's a very Christian thing to do. You know what I mean? Like, that's a very good thing to do. I don't wanna at the time that, the actions of Christians were that's a whole rabbit hole, but really good, good people. I don't wanna say just Christians, but it's a very good thing to do. That's it's a very selfless thing to do.
Yeah. No, I
So,
agree.
yeah. So, and one of the scenes is, here's the sisters in jail, and the jail is like it's not the kind of jail you think of as, today with like prison bars. The jails were often in like other people's houses or, in barns, unless the town had its own jail. Some of these people were brought to Boston or whatever, but the jail that they show in there is like somebody's barn, and they're just shoved in there and on under guard. And here's this 4-year-old girl. Her mother is, pregnant. Her mother ends up getting taken away, and I think she had the baby, who I think the baby died and the mother also died, but the 4-year-old girl is left, and she's in the care of these women, these sisters, and it really makes you think, like, imagine being in that position. Like, I know when someone says, let's say someone says something about me that's not true, right? It really irks me. Like, I don't fight people. I don't do that, but like it does irk me when like somebody thinks something's untrue about me. But that's like, and it causes some anxiety, it causes some problems, but like really I get over it and, move on, and that's the end of it. But imagine like this kind of shit where you can't move on. Someone starts talking shit about you, saying you're a witch, you're this and that, you did this, you did that, and even as much as you proclaim your innocence and you can't get a fair freaking trial, and then you're hanging from a tree. It's like
Yeah, it's crazy.
it's crazy that of all the atrocities, there's been so many atrocities in American history. I mean, so many. I mean, they run the gamut. But this is one of those that's just like, what the fuck? This isn't like, I was in the backwoods of, wherever, and I got, murdered by some sort of person and they never got caught. This is like the court did this. You know what I mean? Like, it's different. It's not like, well, there was a serial killer and he just killed 20 people. Like, it's not even that. That's fucked up in its own right. But this is the court did this. Like
Yeah.
the 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 town did this. Like my neighbors did this. And I think that's the real fucking witchcraft, right? Like that's the real evil right there.